At midnight on January 17th, 1920, the United States did something no great nation had ever attempted. It made alcohol illegal. Not restricted, not taxed, illegal. Everywhere, all at once, written directly into the Constitution itself. Overnight, an entire industry vanished on paper. Breweries that had operated for a century, distilleries older than some states, saloons on nearly every corner of every American city. All of it, by law, gone. And yet, 13 years later, Americans were drinking as much as ever. In some cities, they were drinking more. So how did a country outlaw alcohol and completely fail to stop anyone from drinking it? The answer is one of the strangest chapters in American history. To understand Prohibition, you first have to understand the anger behind it. For most of the 1800s, alcohol was woven into daily American life. Workers were sometimes paid partly in whiskey. Saloons were the social center of working-class neighborhoods, and Americans drank staggering amounts, at times 3 times more pure alcohol per person than they do today. That drinking had consequences. Walges disappeared across saloon counters. Domestic violence was rampant, and women, who in most states couldn't yet vote, had almost no legal power to stop a husband who drank away the family's money. Out of that desperation came a movement. The temperance movement united an unlikely coalition: religious reformers, women's groups, and powerful political organizers in the Anti-Saloon League. They argued that alcohol was the root of poverty, crime, and moral decay, and that the only cure was to eliminate it entirely. For decades, they were dismissed as fringe, but they were relentless, disciplined, and brilliant at politics. And slowly, state by state, they began to win. The breakthrough came with the First World War. Suddenly, going dry could be framed as patriotic. Grain should feed soldiers, not fill beer barrels. And many of America's largest breweries were owned by German-American families, an easy target in a country gripped by anti-German fever. In December 1917, Congress passed the 18th Amendment and sent it to the states. It banned the manufacture, sale, and transportation of intoxicating liquors. By January 1919, enough states had ratified it. A year later, it took effect. But the amendment itself was short and vague. It didn't define what intoxicating actually meant. That job fell to a separate law, the Volstead Act. And the Volstead Act drew the line shockingly low. Anything over 0.5% alcohol was banned. That was far weaker than beer. It meant even mild drinks people didn't consider hard liquor were now completely illegal. On paper, America was bone dry. In reality, the law had holes big enough to drive a truck through, and people noticed almost immediately. Here's the secret at the heart of Prohibition. The law banned making and selling alcohol. It did not clearly ban drinking it, or even owning it. If you had a wine cellar stocked before 1920, you could legally drink from it for years. Wealthy Americans emptied liquor stores in the final weeks before the ban, stockpiling enough to last a decade. Some private clubs simply carried on, their members sipping legally purchased liquor behind closed doors. Then there were the exemptions. Alcohol was still legal for medicinal use, so doctors began writing prescriptions for whiskey by the millions. Pharmacies became a booming business. Religious wine was exempt too, and suddenly enrollment in some congregations mysteriously surged. And farmers were allowed to preserve fruit. That opened the door to a product called the wine brick, a block of concentrated grape juice sold with a helpful warning on the label. Do not dissolve this in water and leave it in a jar for 20 days or it will turn into wine. Customers, of course, followed those instructions precisely. The government had banned the sale of alcohol. It had not banned human ingenuity. With saloons shut down, drinking didn't stop. It just went underground, and it moved into the speakeasy. A speakeasy was an illegal bar hidden behind an ordinary door, a back room, a basement, a shop that sold nothing anyone actually wanted. You needed a password. You needed to know someone. And once you were inside, you entered a world the law pretended didn't exist. The numbers are staggering. Before Prohibition, New York City had roughly 15,000 legal saloons. During Prohibition, the city was estimated to have anywhere from 30,000 to 100,000 speakeasies. The ban hadn't cut the number of drinking establishments. It may have doubled or tripled it. And Prohibition changed who was drinking. Old saloons had mostly been rough male spaces. Speakeasies, being illegal anyway, threw out the old rules. Women drank alongside men for the first time in these hidden clubs. Jazz filled the air. The very law meant to make America more moral helped create the wild, glamorous nightlife of the Roaring '20s. But all those speakeasies needed something to sell, and that created the most dangerous consequence of Prohibition: a massive, unregulated black market worth billions, with no police to protect it and no courts to settle its disputes. That market was seized by organized crime. Smugglers, called bootleggers, ran liquor across the Canadian border and up from the Caribbean. Ships loaded with whiskey anchored just past the legal limit off the coast, a floating liquor supply known as Rum Row. Inland, criminals brewed their own, sometimes in filthy conditions, sometimes with industrial alcohol so toxic it blinded or killed the people who drank it. The profits were almost unimaginable. And where there's that much untaxed money and no legal protection, violence fills the gap. In Chicago, a young gangster named Al Capone built an empire estimated to earn tens of millions of dollars a year, almost entirely from illegal alcohol. Rival gangs fought open wars in the streets, culminating in massacres that shocked the nation. Prohibition was supposed to reduce crime. Instead, it funded the birth of modern organized crime in America. By the late 1920s, the truth was impossible to ignore. Americans were still drinking. Crime was worse, not better. Corruption was everywhere. And the government was spending fortunes to enforce a law that almost nobody obeyed, while collecting nothing from the alcohol trade it had pushed into the shadows. Then came the Great Depression. Suddenly, that lost tax revenue mattered enormously. Legalizing alcohol meant jobs for the unemployed and desperately needed money for the Treasury. The argument for repeal became not just moral, but economic. In 1933, the nation acted. The 21st Amendment was passed, the only amendment in American history written specifically to repeal another. Prohibition was over. It had lasted 13 years. And it stands today as one of the largest failed social experiments any democracy has ever attempted. You can pass a law, you can even write it into the Constitution, but you cannot simply legislate away what millions of people are determined to do. America went dry for 13 years. It never stopped drinking for a single day.